Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Talks in Class. My name is Jenna. I am so happy to be here with you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. It is the end-ish, I guess, of April already, close to the end of April, which is wild. I hope you've all had a nice couple of weeks since the last time we chatted here on the pod. Still sticking with the every 2 weeks schedule for now. Of course, I will update you if and when that changes, hopefully soon. Hopefully we'll be going back to weekly very soon. And I have a lot of fun upcoming potential topics. So I'm excited about that. It's more just like it's a logistical puzzle over here being a one-woman show. I really don't think that I have much to report over here. It's really kind of been the same old routine. We did have some really nice summery weather this past couple of weeks, and I don't know if it's just the Midwest in me or if this is a universal thing, but when the weather gets nice outside, I cannot stay inside. Like, I physically can't stay home. So we've been going out to restaurants a little bit more. I think I actually went out to eat 3 times last week, which is a lot. But honestly, that is my social activity. Like, I don't go out anymore. You know, in my 20s, I was going out to the bars to meet my friends, happy hours, things like that. I don't do that anymore, or I very rarely do that anymore. So going out to lunch or going out to dinner is really my social time now. So this is 37, I guess. So as always, I will start this episode with my what good happened, which is exactly what it sounds like, something good that happened. And now I just have so much good to choose from because I have 2 weeks in between each episode, but I'm going to go with this one. This past weekend, I went to, I guess you could call it Brunch Club. That's really what it is. It's an organization that they have it in cities all over, but here in LA, they meet twice a month for just brunch, just at a restaurant, and they meet for brunch, and it's a small-ish group of women. I think there were 7 or 8 of us at this brunch, and sometimes people see the same people, but sometimes it's new people. It just depends on, the location and what works with everybody's schedule. Somebody actually on Instagram told me about it because I made a joke and said, why isn't there like a brunch club? Like, everybody says join a book club, and I was like, I want a brunch club. Turns out it exists. Of course it does. So I have been meaning to go for a while, but there just hasn't been one that aligned with my schedule, but also the location. So I went this past weekend. It was in West Hollywood. It was so much fun. It was such a great group of women, and definitely something that, feels a little bit out of the comfort zone. Going to a group brunch with a bunch of strangers kind of seems weird, but it wasn't. It was really fun. Everybody was lovely, and I'm definitely going to go again. So I don't know if you're in a new city or it's weird to make and maintain friendships as an adult, regardless of how long you've lived somewhere. So if this is of interest to you, it's called Gals That Brunch. I have no affiliation with them. I just spreading the word. They are like everywhere. So check their website or their social media and see if there is one near you. It was fun. I recommend it. For this week, we are finishing up our 3-part journey through the decade of the 2000s, and we're going to be talking about the fashion trends and, of course, the economic, political, cultural, whatever, all of those factors that influence them, this time focusing on the late 2000s. A while ago, I did a video, or a series of videos, I think it was 2 or 3 videos, where I ranked the years of the 2000s based on which years were my personal favorites and then also least favorites. And this was based on my own experiences, but obviously also very much on the fashion of those different years. And it's funny because the end of the decade, the end of the 2000s, somehow has some of my favorite moments for pop culture and for fashion, and also my least favorite moments for pop culture and fashion. Because on the one hand, we were in the midst of a full-blown financial crisis in 2008, and I was somewhat unaware of this, or at least felt somewhat unaffected, being that I was still a college student. And honestly, my biggest concerns at that time were like which flavor of Four Loko to buy and which hideous $12 Forever 21 skirt I was gonna wear to the bar that night, or I don't know, maybe how to get a bump it to actually stay in my hair. I don't know, but in general, I was feeling a little bit less affected, but a lot of people were really not okay. I just have so much more awareness of this now as an adult going through yet another financially unstable time. But the financial crisis really had far-reaching effects back in the 2000s, which I learned soon after because I graduated into the horrible job market that came after it. But fashion, of course, and pop culture all reflected this in a really big way at the end of the 2000s. There was this odd combination of both like extremely boring fashion, just really kind of back to basics, boring fashion, but also extremely tacky fashion. And it all kind of hit me right around 2008. We'll get to that, don't worry. On the other hand, in the late 2000s, things like music and pop culture, and honestly, even some of those particularly tacky elements of fashion, just made it such a great time to be the age that I was. And I've talked about this many times, but there are these certain years when my age at the time just really felt like it was the perfect age to be. Like the pop culture of that time was made for that specific age group. I turned 21 in 2008, okay? That just feels perfect because in case you don't remember or you weren't there, here are some things that 2008 gave us, gifted to us culturally. The song Low by Flo Rida, you know, apple bottom jeans, boots with the fur, an anthem of the time. Like imagine being 21 years old and listening to that at the bar. I mean, peak. The Sex and the City movie, which is also the first time that I remember seeing an iPhone, which is such a sign of the times. Freaking Twilight came out, the first Twilight movie. Katy Perry's I Kissed a Girl also came out in 2008. Iconic. It also gave me personally a very, very large collection of chunky plastic belts that I wore over basically anything and everything, always at the waist, cinched at the waist. And the blondest hair that I have ever had, I mean, it was basically white combined with a really unnaturally dark tan and a collection of the cheapest, tackiest dresses that Charlotte Russe and Forever 21 and Wet Seal had to offer, which I wore over cropped black leggings or maybe like True Religion jeans, always worn with a little peep toe black pump platform heel and a Coach wristlet because that was fancy. Perhaps most importantly for me, but honestly for pop culture in general, 2008 gave us Lady Gaga. Okay, this was a moment in time. So being 21 years old during the birth of Lady Gaga, taking my first legal shots of alcohol while Love in This Club by Usher just plays loudly in the background in my cheap little bubble hem dress. I mean, it was a time with a bump it in my hair. Something about that, just the whole thing just felt right. You know what I mean? Like it felt perfect. So even though I was living in my own little bubble, my little college 21-year-old bubble, the world as we knew it, that flashy, in your face, you know, idealized hyper American, but also very consumption driven, materialistic, that early to mid 2000s world was kind of crashing and burning all around us. I mean, really, so much was changing literally right in front of our eyes. And fashion, in hindsight, is really easy to see. It's again one of those things that I don't think I really noticed at the time, or I didn't clock it that way at the time. But looking back, it's very apparent. There were these really big shifts that happened toward the end of the 2000s, really after 2008, when we headed into this recession, or we were in this recession. Most notably for me, in terms of what I actually remember from the time as a young person, was that the clothes started to look just exceedingly cheap. And they were. I mean, make no mistake. In 2008, it was kind of like this turning point where I was no longer shopping at stores that really had anything that could resemble quality in their clothing. Because just a few years earlier, I mean, 2004, 2005, even 2006, most of my clothes came from stores like Abercrombie, Hollister, Express, The Buckle, even like BB and R&B. They were mall stores, but they were expensive for what they were, so you purchased less. And I wore those clothes for years. I mean, if I got an expensive halter top from R&B, I wore that thing for years, so they really did last. But by the time I was in college, certainly by like 2008, 2009, I was buying all of my clothes at Forever 21, Charlotte Russe, Wet Seal, you know, those fast fashion, like ultra cheap stores. And part of that obviously was because I was a broke college student buying cheap dresses that were definitely going to get beer spilled on them in the bar. So if I could buy it for super cheap, why wouldn't I? But there was also just this rapidly expanding access to this ultra cheap clothing at these fast fashion retailers. And this makes perfect sense that during a recession, fast fashion would naturally become more popular as people just have less money to spend on non essential items like clothing. Economic downturns generally mean that people simply buy less when it comes to things like, the non-essentials like clothes. They focus on more simple, more versatile designs, higher quality items that can last them longer, that they can wear in different contexts, hence business casual in the clubs. But with this massive rise of fast fashion around this time, there was also this kind of newer option, which was just to buy super cheap, kind of low quality clothing. And I remember distinctly, these clothes literally looked so cheap. I mean, there was a noticeable difference between buying something at Wet Seal versus buying something at Express or even Abercrombie. And even the fashion that celebrities were wearing around this time, I mean, it just all looked really cheap. It was really kind of the aesthetic. It was things like those black cotton leggings that were really thin that you'd wear under just like a plain tunic top. I don't care if it was me wearing it or Kim Kardashian wearing it. They looked cheap, okay? Those black cotton leggings were see-through, whether it was my butt or Kim's that they were barely covering. Or all those super long V-neck t-shirts that everyone started wearing, they always just kind of looked stretched out. The necklines looked not good. It looked cheap. So while we still definitely had status symbol pieces, and denim really comes to mind when I think about this time period in particular, because we had brands like True Religion that got really, really popular. Brands like Miss Me were still really popular around this time. The overall feeling that really existed earlier in the 2000s of luxury in clothing and as a trend in itself in fashion faded really quickly around this time. And it's something that is very apparent when I look back on it. All of a sudden, all those labels and those monograms and just like, the brand names that we saw plastered all over literally everything just a few years earlier were gone. They were gone. Maybe someone would wear a pair of True Religion jeans, for example, which you would only know if you recognize the stitching on the back pockets. It didn't necessarily say True Religion on it too loudly anywhere, but the rest of the outfit would be relatively plain. They would carry a plain black handbag that was the size of a suitcase, but it was plain black instead of a bag with the Louis Vuitton logo all over it in a rainbow print, color palette, for example. Even Juicy Couture, which is arguably one of the biggest celebrity-driven brand name crazes of the 2000s, really started to fade in popularity as people, again, just had less money to spend on things like luxury clothing items. But I think especially things like a tracksuit, which at this point you could easily buy at a lot of other places at a much, much lower price, just without the designer label and the little zipper pull with the J on it, obviously. But I remember at this time, the tracksuits started to become a little bit less common. And I remember starting to see a lot more juicy accessories around this time. The bags became really popular. Everybody had the shoes. I had juicy glasses, but a lot less juicy clothing. And again, this makes sense. Even when I think about things like wristlets becoming really popular, makes sense when you think about it, because a Coach wristlet's a lot cheaper than a Coach purse. A juicy pair of sandals is a lot cheaper than a juicy tracksuit. I mean, bonus points that my little Coach wristlet was just the perfect size to put my ID and my debit card and my, BlackBerry in it to take to the bar. Again, right age, right time, you know what I mean? But these conspicuous displays of wealth that really felt like they characterized those early to mid 2000s years were just minimized in a really noticeable way, kind of suddenly at this time. And it felt like it happened overnight. Even then, it was like we went from this flashy, like loud, fun, happy designer label celebrity party to suddenly everybody just kind of looked boring. Honestly, that's how I felt. Everybody started to look a lot more understated. People started dyeing their hair more natural, realistic colors. Not me, but other people. People even started to go back to their natural colors because, again, it costs a lot of money to maintain platinum hair. Makeup and accessories, though, went the opposite direction. They got really bold, which was kind of fun. I mean, it was tacky, but it was kind of fun. And again, it's the lipstick theory, right? A statement necklace or a lipstick is much less expensive than buying a new outfit. So those things become the focal points of fashion during a recession because it's more affordable than spending the money on clothes. So as the accessories and the makeup were getting bolder and more statement oriented, actual clothing, again, got kind of boring looking, got kind of cheap looking, got maybe actually cheaper. Overall, looking back, it was just kind of like this idea of looking super rich that was so important, so crucial, and so central to fashion and pop culture and trendiness in the early to mid 2000s, or this idea of flaunting your wealth through what you were wearing or what you owned just suddenly was not cool anymore. Because suddenly there were a ton of people right in front of you, people you knew, people who were your neighbors, your coworkers, they were losing their jobs, they were losing their homes. I mean, people were directly impacted in ways that felt a lot more tangible. So this idea that we could present ourselves as superior or, show off through these flashy designer labels or these bright colored kind of like sexy clothing or even that we would want to do that suddenly just felt kind of gross. So instead of routinely seeing celebrities wearing an entire outfit head to toe with these flashy, obvious, visible labels, which was, huge in the 2000s, instead we would see those same celebrities all of a sudden going out in a plain white t-shirt and just generic looking black skinny jeans or even leggings. Like they would go out in leggings, like celebrities, they're just like us. Speaking of the later 2000s, this time period sparked one of perhaps the most heated debates that I have lived through in my entire life. And I'm not talking about whether the dress was white and gold or blue and black or whether the soundbite said Laurel or Yanny. Those both came later. I am talking about the debate over leggings as pants. Now, in the year of our Lord 2024, I'm just going to go ahead and declare leggings as pants. I think we've reached a point as a society where we've accepted that people are going to wear leggings as pants, and that's okay with us. But in those days, in like 2007, 2008, 2009, leggings were not what they are today. They were flimsy, thin, cotton leggings that we wore under the tunic tops that we weren't really sure how we were supposed to wear. Like, was it a top? Was it a dress? Am I supposed to wear it over jeans? Is it too long for that? So our solution was to put leggings under everything during this time. But the rule was for leggings. If you were gonna wear it with leggings, it had to cover your butt because leggings were not pants. I still remember buying t-shirts around this time and being in the fitting room, stretching them down to make sure that they covered my full butt in my leggings because otherwise I couldn't wear them. Oh my God, is this why all of us little sorority girls decided to start wearing extra large Hanes men's undershirts to class every single day? Because that was the easiest way we could find shirts that were long enough to wear with our leggings? Maybe. They were also very cheap. I don't know. But one thing that I know is that if I had to choose one item, one article of clothing to define the year 2008, it would be those like cheap, thin, black leggings, cropped length, always cropped length. And when I think about some of the biggest trends of the very end of the decade, they were so 80s influenced. It's so funny to look back and it's clear as day now. Like things like the leggings, tunic tops in general, but especially tunic tops belted at the waist with a really thick, brightly colored plastic belt. We had the high hair, we had the bump or the snooky poof as we called it later, which is actually very reminiscent of like a 50s pompadour, but the 80s had a lot of 50s influence. It's that 30-year trend cycle that comes back and back around. Also the jewelry that I was wearing in the later 2000s, you guys, but specifically 2008, very specifically, it literally looked like my grandma's costume jewelry that she wore in the actual 80s. It was these big, chunky plastic beaded necklaces. Do you remember those? I bought it all at Wet Seal. They would come in every single color. I had a turquoise one, I had a yellow one, I had a red one. And again, I would color coordinate them to match my other brightly colored plastic accessories. I like bought out the cheap plastic accessory rack at Wet Seal. And then there were things like metallics and embellishments that really gained a lot of popularity during that boho glam era of the mid 2000s, but those really stuck around too. So we had things like, you know, studs and rhinestones on everything combined with like the chunky 80s jewelry. It was a lot of statement accessories during those times. Things like giant metallic bags with like every kind of embellishment you could think of on them. Tassels, charms, studs, rhinestones. Do you guys remember Kathy Van Zeeland bags? Nothing looks more like that time to me than a Kathy Van Zeeland metallic purse. They were everything that 21-year-old me could have imagined in this time. First of all, they were giant. At least every single one that I saw was giant, as were all of our bags at this time. I mean, this is why we have shoulder problems. Our whole generation has shoulder issues because of the purses that we carried from like 2006 to 2012. They were like literally the size of a carry-on bag, and we had them just draped over our shoulder casually. They were giant, but they also had all these details that were very of the time. They were metallic, some had animal print accents. They had a lot of rhinestones and like charms, studs, you name it, it was on there. Sometimes all on the same bag. I actually had two Kathy Van Zeeland bags and they were identical. I got them on clearance. One was gold and one was bronze. And I actually sadly just threw the gold one away probably about a year ago because the metallic plasticky whatever it's made out of was peeling, just peeling all apart. It was getting all over everything. So it had to go in the trash and it was a sad day. But I carried those bags everywhere for years. Like 2006, 2007 through 2010, that was my bag. So RIP to my Kathy Van Zeeland metallic bags. And then there were other mid-2000s styles that also stuck around at this time, but just sort of evolved towards the end of the 2000s. The tiny jackets and the shrugs stuck around, but then we also saw, in addition to tiny jackets and shrugs, a big trend of tiny little vests that we would wear over just a plain t-shirt. So it'd be like a tiny little vest over a boring t-shirt and then just like jeans. Giant sunglasses also stuck around, statement jewelry, like I said. Shoe trends also, like ballet flats, kitten heels, just like a sleeker shoe stayed really popular. And of course, skinny jeans continued to become more and more popular and really kind of went mainstream during this time period of the late 2000s. Skinny jeans are one of my favorite trends to talk about because they've obviously become a very hot topic in recent discussions around fashion trends and have become synonymous with millennial style. But they're a really great example of how trends used to evolve before social media was constantly bombarding us with messaging around things being in or out or whatever. And it's not like this messaging didn't exist in the 2000s. You know, we still had media telling us like, this is out of style, this is in style. I think it just felt a lot less targeted and a lot less personal. So it was easier to ignore or easier to dismiss and just say like, I don't care about this. Hearing someone casually mention that a style of pant or, you know, a color or a print or whatever that you personally loved was out on a makeover TV show, like a What Not to Wear type TV show, for example, I think that was just a lot easier to dismiss, or at least a lot easier to not internalize, because a lot of times it was directed towards a different individual in the scenario on the show. So it was easier to ignore it than it is to dismiss like watching a minute-long dedicated video about how if you wear that specific pant or that specific print or that specific color, you're out of style and therefore out of touch and old and washed up. Even more so when the videos specifically call out certain groups of people, you know, when they're like, hey, millennial women, stop wearing this stuff because it's making you look old. That feels a lot different than, for example, in-style magazine simply listing something that you still owned in its out category on, a single page in a magazine buried with a bunch of other things. And I think the result, or one of the results of this social media discourse around things being in or out, is that we have developed this idea of trends happening suddenly or trends shifting suddenly, like an on-off switch. And in some cases, that does happen, right? Especially with these really fast fads that are driven, especially by like a specific event or a specific celebrity or something like that. And they tend to come on really quickly and then fade very, very quickly. Von Dutch is a great example of this, I think, actually. But for the most part, that's not how it happens in real life off social media. And skinny jeans, if you look at them throughout the 2000s and even into the early 2010s, are a perfect example of that. In the early to mid 2000s, skinny jeans were around. They just weren't mainstream yet. They were a trend amongst some groups. They became very associated with emo kids around the mid 2000s. And then we started to see them more and more gain traction in mainstream, being in more stores, just being more widely accessible. But it really took a long time, and they coexisted. This is important. Skinny jeans coexisted along with bootcut styles for several years in the mainstream. Like, you could easily walk into any regular popular mall store and find skinny jeans and bootcut jeans at the same time. I owned both for years, probably from, I think I got my first pair of skinny jeans that I actually wore in 2008. I got my first pair in 2006 because I was forced to buy them because I worked at Hollister and I hated them. But I got the first one that I voluntarily purchased in 2008. And from about then until late 2011, I wore both interchangeably before finally shifting only to skinny jeans. I wore them differently, I guess, depending on where I was going or like the outfit, the shoes especially, that was important. I love to wear my skinny jeans with a pair of ballet flats and like a long shirt. It was very Lauren Conrad. And in those days, I had my skinny jeans just all bunched up at the ankles. That's such a specific 2008 era visual that I think of, is a pair of ballet flats and a pair of skinny jeans like bunched up at the ankles. Because why were they always so long? Why were all the jeans so long in the 2000s? Someone explain to me. Who were they making the jeans for? Not for me, certainly. But I also like to wear my bootcut jeans with wedges or any shirt that wasn't super long. That was important. If the shirt wasn't long, I did a boot cut. I guess it was kind of the leggings rule applied to skinny jeans as well. Long shirt with skinny jeans, shorter shirt, boot cut jean. And in fashion in general, beyond the skinny jeans, it did feel like there were a bunch of somewhat underground or more indie styles that had been brewing through the 2000s in these smaller subgroups, whether that was, a hipster style or more of the twee kind of artsy thing, or boho, which was really huge in the 2000s, or the emo or scene kids of, 2005 who evolved into, I don't know, the hipster kids or like the swag hipsters or the ironic hipsters, whatever variation it was. There were all of these kind of indie styles that had become mainstream or more mainstream by this time period of the end of the 2000s, and were just on the brink of becoming almost basic. And I think that's where we ended up with the hipster thing and the indie sleaze thing into the early 2010s, when it started to feel kind of basic. Like, all of these styles were just about there. They were almost about to be readily available in every Forever 21 store across America. And the styles from that very early part of the 2000s, like cropped shirts, any short variation of a shirt, or cargo pants, wider leg pants, brands like Von Dutch, those styles by this period looked dated or looked old in a way that was beyond simply like, that's not cool anymore. By this point, it was gone. It was really gone. It was dead. We had completely moved past this. And these staples of the early to mid 2000s fashion, like Von Dutch or even Juicy Couture, were kind of dying. And for me, this also felt like the last breath for Abercrombie and Fitch, honestly. As we entered this kind of full-blown 80s revival, let's call it like it is, 80s revival of the late 2000s, and inched towards the neon Jersey Shore moment of the very early 2010s, Abercrombie honestly started to feel a little bit dated and stale too. The whole brand image of being, classic, neutral, all American, very girl next door, it just clashed with the cultural moment, the attitudes of young people and what we wanted, especially coming into like 2009, 2010. I mean, this was the time of bumpets and feather hair extensions and duck nails and like neon pink leopard print. This time period was so intentionally lowbrow, even in a way that the early 2000s couldn't quite match, because now we were being tacky, but also people were legitimately broke. So it wasn't even like designer tacky, it was just like straight up tacky. So when you add in that exclusivity factor when it came to Abercrombie, the importance of the label, the importance of the brand name that was really central to their entire identity as a brand and a store, it just didn't fit. It didn't fit what was happening at the time. And it did. It started to feel stale to me at that time period. I wanted to go next door and buy a pair of neon pink zebra print waistband yoga pants at Victoria's Secret, pink with rhinestones. I didn't want a gray t-shirt with a moose on it anymore. And it is also worth noting that I grew up with Abercrombie and Hollister. I mean, I was wearing these clothes for a decade by this time, and I still owned a lot of clothes from those places at this time. But 2009 was the noticeable shift for me away from those stores and those styles kind of like once and for all. Well, actually not once and for all, because I rediscovered Abercrombie in about 2017 and honestly never looked back. But for me, 2009 is the year that the 2000s as I knew it really died and something new began. By 2009, like 2000s media, like burned CDs, disposable cameras, those things had been entirely replaced by MP3 players, iTunes, digital cameras, whatever. I think I burned my very last CD in late 2008, RIP, and I still have it. It's a horrendous mix, but it was the end of an era. And social media too. By the late 2000s, by 2008, 2009, I mean, social media was really ubiquitous. Everybody was on it. Facebook was open to everybody and had been long enough for everybody you knew to be on it. There were no longer, these barriers to social media. We had it on our smartphones by this time. So we were no longer in a pre-digital age or in this kind of adoption or growth phase of these technologies. We were fully in it. We were in a digital age, and we were just on the cusp of being really catapulted into a full-blown social media age, even I would say a social media reliance in the 2010s, with things like Tumblr really gaining ground, and then in the early 2010s, Instagram, the widespread adoption of iPhones and similar smartphones. I think I got my first non-BlackBerry smartphone in early 2010. And that's when I started to use my phone as everything. That's when all of my other technologies kind of became irrelevant. I used my phone as my camera. I used my phone as my music device. I started using the aux cord in my car instead of CDs. It was the end of an era, and it was the start of something else. And 2009 is a special year in my heart because it is the beginning, or it was the beginning, of a brief little snapshot in time that I just call the neon era, or the Jersey Shore era, honestly. And these labels are arbitrary, obviously, and of course they're very dependent on things like age and geographic location, socioeconomic factors, and just personal preference too. But this was the swag thing. This was the Jersey Shore thing. It was the Victoria's Secret wide waistband yoga pant thing. For me, this was bathing myself, and I do mean bathing myself, like half a bottle of Juicy Couture or Ed Hardy perfume every single morning before I put on my black leggings, obviously, and my hot, like neon pink Victoria's Secret sequined hoodie with my black Uggs, and coated my concealer lips with an extra layer, maybe a touch of gloss, threw on my extra large, super fake diamond stud earrings and a pair of plastic aviators that were like the size of my head, and headed out the door, probably to go to the tanning salon or the nail salon or both. And I remember kind of feeling this slight vibe shift throughout 2009, like things were getting somehow even tackier even trashier. If this was even possible by this time, we were pushing the envelope of how tacky we could be. We were going back to these super flashy, super unrefined styles, sort of reminiscent to what we had in like 2003, 2004. And we had this brief moment. It's so funny, like looking back, we had this brief moment in maybe late 2007 through 2008 where we were just rocking simple black jeans and like gray t-shirts, and then boom, neon everywhere, everything was bright colored. It was like wild. And then Jersey Shore premiered at the end of 2009, December 2009, and truly unleashed a new era. Okay, I don't care if you weren't a fan of Jersey Shore, I don't care what you thought about it. It was a true cultural reset, especially for people around my age at this time. Again, right age, right time. Its impact was profound. Honestly, I mean, I know that sounds really dramatic, but it was. And I don't say that ironically. I know it sounds absurd, but it truly was. I was 22 years old when Jersey Shore premiered. It changed our brain chemistry. I don't know. I did a whole episode about Jersey Shore a while ago, but it just really made a huge impact on pop culture and by extension on young people, on fashion. As terrifying as that is, it made an impact on fashion for young people at the time, at least. And of course, there are always transitional time periods, and there were other things going on in fashion at the time besides just this kind of neon swag Jersey Shore thing. Most notably for me, in my experience, was the rise of both hipster fashion and also business casual fashion. But as we moved into the early 2010s, a lot of those neon kind of Jersey Shore era tacky trends held on for a little bit longer. But to me, this time period, or that specific thing really died by like 2012, maybe even 2011, but that's a conversation for another time. I don't want to even dip a toe down the 2010s rabbit hole because I can go deep. So we'll save that one for potentially a future episode. So I am going to wrap this up with a list as always, and to honor this magical yet somewhat horrifying time in fashion and pop culture history, I am going to leave you with 5 trends from the late 2000s that I loved then, but kind of cringe when I think about now. Number 5, of course, are the tunics worn over the leggings. I think I've covered this enough. I think I've made my feelings clear, but just in case I need to reiterate, this is my most deeply regretted fashion choice probably ever. And I was so in denial about the 80s resemblance at the time. Number 4, colorful skinny jeans in literally every color of the rainbow, often worn with a pair of platform stiletto heels, or maybe those like shoe booty thingies. Do you remember the shoe boots? The shoe, I don't know what they're called. There were boots / shoes, probably with some sort of ruffled top, maybe also with like a teeny tiny jacket over it. Or if you were a cool girl, you wore your colorful skinny jeans with a pair of Converse and a graphic tee. Look, this was a moment in time, but I personally don't need to go back there ever. Number 3, bubble hemmed dresses. If you never wore a strapless, kind of empire-waisted bubble hem mini dress to some sort of event, did you even live through 2008? My event was sorority formal, and the dress was silver zebra print with a bubble hem strapless dress. I wore it with tight curls in my bleach blonde hair with a side part that was basically on top of my ear. Like it was a comb over, let's be honest. It was so far to the side. Peep toe pumps and a fake Chanel enamel bracelet. Oh my God. I mean, it was 2008. I have no other explanation or excuse. Number 2, hot pink and black room decor. I thought that hot pink and black was the height of luxury and sophistication in interior design in 2008, 2009. My bedroom, I had a black and white like damask print comforter that was from Target, and I remember it had pink trim along the side of the comforter. So I naturally paired that with hot pink sheets, and then I had a lampshade with the same black and white pattern that I probably got at like Bed Bath and Beyond, I don't know. A leopard print throw blanket on the end of the bed because the black and white pattern wasn't enough. I had to also add some animal print. A hot pink shag rug. And I even had hot pink sorority letters on my wall that were painted with an ivy pattern in black. Oh, and of course, obviously, a hot pink Breakfast at Tiffany's Audrey Hepburn poster. And a pink Dell computer, the pink Dell laptop. Do you remember the pink Dell laptop? I had that. So literally the whole room was pink, black, white, and leopard. You could not tell me anything, okay? I thought I was crushing it. Nothing could touch this room decor in my little mind. It was a moment, but I'm kind of ashamed looking back now, just a little. And number one, tanning. Because nothing complimented a neon pink Victoria's Secret tank top with the armpits cut down to my waistband to show off my Aztec print bandeau and a feather hair extension, quite like a deep, dark tanning bed tan achieved with probably a Snooki or JWoww brand tanning lotion. Do I regret that? Yes, deeply, very deeply. Did I look amazing at the time? Yeah, yep, I did. And with that, I will leave you here. I hope you all enjoyed this little journey through the 2000s, through some of our questionable and maybe some of our good fashion choices. If you did enjoy this episode or the series of 3, I would so appreciate it if you shared it with a friend. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.